U.S. Stock Market Summary, February 14, 2025, S&P 500 closes just shy of record. Major indexes post weekly gains by Investopedia. Sound production by Investment Ideas Channel. U.S. stocks were mixed on Friday after being buoyed yesterday by a promising wholesale inflation report and an executive order from President Trump that stopped short of imposing additional tariffs. The Nasdaq Composite rose 0.4% to close at a three-week high, while the S&P 500 finished the session virtually unchanged after flirting with an all-time high earlier in the day. The Dow Jones Industrial Average slid 0.4%. The major indexes all advanced this week. The Dow added 0.6%, the S&P 500 rose 1.5%, and the Nasdaq gained 2.6%. Airbnb led S&P 500 gainers, soaring more than 14% Friday after the company beat earnings estimates. Roku stock also jumped double digits after it posted a narrower-than-expected loss. Palo Alto Networks rebounded from an early slump to close just 1% lower after issuing guidance that underwhelmed Wall Street. Chip manufacturing equipment provider Applied Materials led Nasdaq 100 losers, falling 8% on disappointing results. Big tech stocks were mixed Friday, with Microsoft, Alphabet, Amazon, and Tesla all down marginally. Broadcom stock fell 1%. Apple rose 1% and Nvidia added 2%. Shares of Meta Platforms rose 1% to notch the stock's 20th consecutive winning session. U.S. retail sales fell 0.9% in January, a far larger decline than economists were expecting. The drop was driven by a 3% slump in car sales, but spending declined from December in nearly every category tracked by the Census Bureau's report. Treasury yields dropped sharply on the report, with the 10-year yield falling to 4.48% from 4.53%. The dollar also fell. Yields have retreated from their highs earlier this year as investors have adjusted their expectations for interest rate cuts and attempted to predict the impact Trump's tariff plans will have on inflation and the labor market. Bitcoin swung as high as $98,600 before retreating to trade around $97,000. Gold futures tumbled from near-record highs to $2,895 an ounce. West Texas Intermediate crude oil futures were also down at about $70.50 a barrel. Top S&P 500 movers on Friday. Advancers. Airbnb was the top-performing stock in the S&P 500 on Friday, popping 14.5% higher after the vacation rental platform topped expectations for fourth-quarter profits, bookings, and gross booking value. CEO Brian Chesky suggested that the company intends to develop the Airbnb app into a one-stop shop for travel needs. Shares of server provider Supermicro Computer wrapped up a week of significant gains with a surge of 13.3%. In addition to the upbeat fiscal 2026 revenue outlook provided by Supermicro earlier this week, the company received a boost from reports on Friday that Facebook parent Meta Platforms plans to make a large investment in humanoid robots. The robots would likely operate on cloud-based artificial intelligence (AI) technology, and Meta uses Supermicro servers in its data centers. Supermicro faces a deadline on February 25 for the filing of its delayed annual report. Fourth-quarter results from Wynn Resorts blew past sales and profit estimates, and shares of the hotel and casino operator jumped 10.4%. Highlights of the quarter included strong performance from the company's Wynn Palace property in Macau as well as its Las Vegas operations. The company also highlighted construction progress on its integrated resort in the United Arab Emirates, which is on track to open in March 2027. Decliners. GoDaddy shares tumbled 14.3%, suffering the steepest drop in the S&P 500, after the website domain company posted mixed results for the fourth quarter. Although revenue for the period edged out estimates, earnings per share, EPS, fell short of forecasts. Analysts at Cantor Fitzgerald noted GoDaddy's progress on product initiatives, including AI-driven marketing and design tools, but they reduced their price target on the stock, citing valuation concerns. Shares of DaVita, a provider of dialysis treatments and other kidney care services, sank 11.1%. The company provided a lackluster outlook for adjusted profits in 2025, citing elevated healthcare costs. Meanwhile, major investor Berkshire Hathaway trimmed its position in DaVita, adding to the pressure on the stock. Applied Materials shares fell 8.2% following the semiconductor equipment maker's quarterly earnings release. Although the company beat sales and profit estimates for its fiscal first quarter of 2025, Applied Materials noted that recent restrictions on exports to China would negatively impact sales, reducing revenue by an estimated $400 million for the full fiscal year. Twilio stock drops on weak earnings forecast. Twilio shares slumped Friday after the company gave a weak earnings forecast as sales of its data platform fell and it took a hit from a key customer's slowdown in payments. Twilio reported adjusted earnings per share, EPS, of $1 for the fourth quarter, slightly below analysts' estimates compiled by Visible Alpha. Revenue rose 11% year-over-year to $1.19 billion, topping forecasts. The results came as Twilio's communications revenue jumped 12% to $1.12 billion. However, revenue from its customer data platform called Segment declined 1% to $74.1 million, with the unit posting a non-GAAP loss from operations of $10 million. The company also said it incurred $16.8 million in bad debt expenses related to Brazilian telecom firm Oi SA, as a result of a slowdown in their ongoing payment activity. Twilio projected current quarter EPS in the range of 88 cents to 93 cents, and revenue of $1.13 billion to $1.14 billion. Analysts had been looking for EPS of 99 cents and revenue of $1.14 billion. Shares of Twilio were down about 15% late Friday, though even with Friday's decline, they've more than doubled in value over the past year. These are the stocks moving on Nvidia's 13F filing. Shares of WeRide soared Friday, along with other tech stocks after Nvidia disclosed a stake in the Chinese autonomous driving company. WeRide shares nearly doubled in value during Friday's session, after a filing Thursday showed Nvidia held 1.74 million shares as of December 31. WeRide, which operates driverless vehicles in 30 cities across 9 countries, made its debut on the Nasdaq in October. The filing showed Nvidia added a stake in Nebius Group, an AI infrastructure company, as well. Shares of Nebius were up 7% in recent trading. Meanwhile, shares of AI voice technology company SoundHound AI, delivery robot developer Serve Robotics, and medical technology firm NanoX Imaging tumbled as the filing showed Nvidia divested its holdings in those companies. United States Securities and Exchange Commission. Nvidia. Form 13F. November 14, 2024. SoundHound shares dropped over 30%, Serve Robotics shares plunged more than 40%, and NanoX fell 11%. Nvidia also reduced its stake in chip designer ARM Holdings to roughly 1.1 million shares from 1.96 million. Its shares were down 5% Friday afternoon. Moderna stock up despite wider-than-expected loss. Moderna reported a wider loss than expected for the fourth quarter on Friday morning, and the drug maker's sales forecast for 2025 also came in below estimates. The COVID vaccine maker reported revenue of $966 million for the final quarter of 2024, down 65% year-over-year, but in line with what analysts had expected. However, Moderna's loss per share of $2.91 was more than the $2.73 per share analysts had projected, according to estimates compiled by Visible Alpha. In 2025, we remain focused on driving sales, delivering up to 10 product approvals through 2027, and expanding cost efficiencies across our business, CEO Stefan Bancel said Friday. In September, the company said it was planning to cut up to $1.1 billion in research and development costs by 2027 by pausing or ending development of some earlier-stage drugs to focus on winning approval for drugs currently in late-stage trials. Bancel said the company expects to have cut about $1 billion in costs by the end of this year, and said Moderna anticipates multiple approvals of new drugs starting in 2025. Moderna said Friday that it expects revenue of $1.5 billion to $2.5 billion in 2025, well below the $3.26 billion analyst consensus. The drug maker said it expects just $200 million of revenue in the first half of the year, reflecting the seasonality of its respiratory business, while analysts had expected $207 million in revenue in just the first quarter. Entering 2025, Moderna has 2 products, its COVID vaccine and a vaccine to prevent the respiratory disease RSV in adults 60 and older. The company said it has recently submitted approval requests for its next-generation COVID vaccine, a combination vaccine for COVID and the flu, and an RSV vaccine for high-risk adults aged 18 to 59. Moderna shares were up more than 2% Friday afternoon, and have lost more than 60% of their value in the last 12 months. Intel stock drops at the end of a rip-roaring week. Intel early Friday was on track to notch its best week-long stretch in nearly 40 years before the rally sputtered. Shares were down 3% in recent trading. That still had the stock up 22% since the start of the week, a solid return, though less than the near 30% weekly gain seen earlier Friday, which would have marked the stock's best 5-day stretch since 1987. Intel was one of the worst-performing stocks in the S&P 500 last year, when shares lost 60% of their value and the storied American chipmaker was dropped from the blue-chip Dow. The company has struggled to keep up with competitors in the race to develop AI chips and has invested billions in an uncertain turnaround plan. Shares got a boost early this week when Vice President J.D. Vance, speaking at an AI conference in Paris, said the Trump administration would take steps to ensure AI chips are designed and manufactured in the U.S. Intel's foundry business, which manufactures chips for third parties, could benefit from Trump forcing tech companies to fabricate their tech domestically. Intel Foundry was a big bet of former CEO Pat Gelsinger that lost more than $13 billion last year. The stock got another boost this week from speculation that Intel may partner with Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company, the world's largest chip manufacturer and major Intel Foundry competitor, to fabricate chips in the U.S. and benefit from protectionist policies implemented by Trump and former President Joe Biden. The TSMC rumor was just the latest in a series of rumored tie-ups. Qualcomm reportedly approached Intel last year to propose a takeover, and analysts have speculated that Broadcom could be interested in acquiring the company. Palo Alto Networks stock slips as results narrowly top estimates. Shares of Palo Alto Networks fell Friday despite the cybersecurity firm's latest quarter results for the latest quarter coming in just above estimates. After the bell Thursday, Palo Alto reported 81 cents in fiscal second quarter adjusted earnings per share on $2.26 billion in revenue for the quarter, each just above what analysts had expected, per estimates compiled by Visible Alpha. The company projected revenue of $2.26 billion to $2.29 billion for the third quarter, along with adjusted EPS of 76 cents to 77 cents, each roughly in line with analyst estimates. Palo Alto's full-year forecasts for revenue lifted slightly from the first quarter, and adjusted EPS were also in line with analyst consensus. The firm's second quarter results were fueled by customers adopting technology driven by the imperative of AI, including cloud investment and infrastructure modernization, CEO Nikesh Arora said in a statement. Also on Thursday, Palo Alto Networks said it was expanding its board of directors to 11 members from 9 previously with the addition of former Danish Prime Minister Helle Thorning-Schmidt and former CEO of Swiss banking giant UBS Group Ralph Hammers. Palo Alto shares were down more than 3% Friday, after entering the day up just under 10% over the last 12 months. DraftKings stock soars on strong earnings outlook. DraftKings shares soared Friday after the online sports betting platform topped profit estimates and boosted its outlook as it added customers and benefited from its purchase of rival Jackpocket. The company raised the lower end of its revenue forecast for 2025 to $6.3 billion to $6.6 billion, from $6.2 billion to $6.6 billion previously. For the fourth quarter of 2024, DraftKings posted adjusted earnings per share, EPS, of 14 cents, double the analyst consensus compiled by Visible Alpha. Revenue rose 13.2% year-over-year to $1.39 billion, just slightly below projections. The results came as the company said its monthly unique players jumped 36% to 4.8 million. DraftKings also pointed to its expansion into new jurisdictions and the impact of its acquisition of Jackpocket. As with rival Flutter, which operates the FanDuel betting platform, DraftKings suggested its performance was held back by bettors winning too many wagers on National Football League (NFL) games. Shares of DraftKings were up nearly 14% in intraday trading Friday and have gained more than 40% since the start of the year. Applied Materials stock slips on predicted China sales headwinds. Shares of Applied Materials fell Friday morning after the company's projections for current quarter sales left room for disappointment. Applied Materials results for the first quarter of fiscal 2025 came in after the bell Thursday, with the company reporting $7.17 billion in revenue and $2.38 in adjusted earnings per share, each topping estimates. Despite the estimate-topping quarter, the maker of semiconductor manufacturing equipment said its sales could be negatively impacted by recent limitations on exports. The company said it expects second quarter revenue of $7.1 billion, roughly in line with the $7.16 billion analyst consensus, though the company set the sales range at $400 million above or below that midpoint. The ability of U.S. companies to serve the China market is constrained and has been further limited by updated trade rules announced in December and January, CEO Gary Dickerson said in Thursday's earnings call. Dickerson said the company expects to face a headwind of about $400 million in sales in fiscal 2025 because of the new rules, according to a transcript of prepared remarks published ahead of the earnings call. In December, the U.S. government announced new restrictions on the export of semiconductor manufacturing equipment and software, citing possible military and national security concerns. Sales in China were $2.24 billion in the quarter, nearly a third of the company's total revenue compared to $3 billion in sales for 45% of revenue the same time last year. China sales also declined last quarter, after analysts had said a slowdown in demand for certain tech hardware products in China could affect Applied Materials and other companies. Applied Materials shares were down more than 6% Friday morning. Roku stock jumps on better-than-expected results. Roku shares jumped early Friday after the streaming company posted better-than-estimated fourth-quarter results. The streaming platform reported a narrower fourth-quarter operating loss of $39.1 million versus the $104.2 million loss it posted in the same period in 2023. Revenue jumped 22% year-over-year to $1.20 billion, all the numbers beat consensus estimates from Visible Alpha. Roku also said it expects to be operating income positive for the full year 2026. The company projected first-quarter revenue of $1.0 billion and full-year 2025 revenue at $4.61 billion. Those figures were in line with estimates, but J.P. Morgan analysts Thursday said the company threw a curveball and provided a year-ahead outlook for the first time since 2022. J.P. Morgan stuck with its outperform rating on Roku and raised its price target on the stock to $115 from $92 each. Roku shares were up 14% Friday morning, putting them into positive territory for the past year. Airbnb stock soars on bigger-than-expected profit. Airbnb swung to a bigger-than-expected profit in the fourth quarter, sending shares soaring in extended trading Thursday. The company's revenue grew 12% year-over-year to $2.5 billion, above the analyst consensus tracked by Visible Alpha. Its net income of $461 million, or 73 cents per share, compared to a loss of $349 million, or 55 cents per share, a year earlier, beating expectations. The gains came as bookings rose 12% to $111 million, with growth across regions. Airbnb's gross booking value was up 13% to $17.6 billion. Both figures topped analysts' projections. Looking ahead, Airbnb said it expects first-quarter revenue of $2.23 billion to $2.27 billion, slightly below the $2.3 billion analysts were looking for, and warned foreign exchange headwinds could negatively impact revenue growth. Shares of Airbnb soared about 14% in pre-market trading on Friday. Before Friday, the stock had lost about 10% over the past 12 months through Thursday's close.